Hello everyone, this is Judge Lackman here. In this video I'm going to be covering perhaps a number of different topics, starting out with the current controversy that's erupted about Gaia TV, the online network which presents a very wide spectrum of media content, of films and shows pertaining to spirituality, metaphysics, holistic health, yoga, extraterrestrial disclosure, and ancient civilizations. These are all topics that might fall under the umbrella of what people refer to as New Age. And they're all topics that have been of interest to myself for many years. I've been exploring all these subjects for over 20 years, which is a very large chunk of my own life. And in the process of researching and exploring and investigating those subjects, I've read and researched many of the key personalities in those fields. I'm a holistic healer myself, practicing spiritual energy healing using hypnosis and meditation, and also researching things like nutrition and diet, mind-body healing, energy psychology, and different energy-based healing technologies. These are things that to me are very much of value, things that are very worthwhile to explore and gain understanding of, and things that we can all use to enhance our lives, to facilitate our own healing and integration, our own spiritual development. Therefore, when there is a network or some type of media outlet such as Gaia TV that's making this type of information available to the public, on the surface at least, this appears to be something of value, something that many people can benefit from. However, we live in a world where there's a variety of corporate type mindsets at work, and also various hidden agendas that in some way seek to subvert or manipulate things to accomplish something that might not be in the best interests of humanity or of those of us living here on this planet. So we need to be able to look at both realities simultaneously, to see both the dark and the light, to recognize our own blind spots, our own shadows, as well as the blind spots and shadows that other people are exhibiting as we perceive that external reality that's occurring around us. So the situation with Gaia TV is a sort of complex drama, and to really explore and look into it, we can begin with the person who is the creator, the founder, and the chief executive there with the Gaia network and with the Gaiam or Gaia company, which originally was a company that sold a variety of holistic health-oriented products and yoga videos, things like that. The man who's the pioneer, the founder of Gaia, is a person from Eastern Europe, and we're going to kind of explore his background and see what may be the light side as well as the shadow side there. I'm just going to my page here with his background. The man's name is Jirka. That's spelled Jirka. And his last name is Rysavy, which is spelled Rysavy. So Jirka Rysavy has been the Chief Executive Officer of Gaia Inc. since July 1st, 2016, and serves as its Chairman of the Board and Founder. Rysavy is the founder of Gaia Americas Inc. and serves as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of CEX Holdings Incorporated. He founded Gaia Inc. and served as its Chief Executive Officer from December 1998 to March 2009. He founded Corporate Express, that's a company in the office supplies business, in 1986 and served as its chairman until January 1999 and chief executive officer until September 1998. He founded Crystal Market and served as its chief executive officer and chairman. He has been the chairman emeritus of Corporate Express Inc. since January 1999. He founded Life Balance Media LLC in 1988 and serves as its chairman. He serves as the chairman of Gaia Inc. He served as chairman of the board of Whole Foods Market. He served as chairman of Real Goods Solar from January 2008 to June 11, 2013. And that's just a partial, not absolutely complete outline of his corporate activities as an executive and entrepreneur. The interesting thing is he came to America from Czechoslovakia, and when he came, he was starting out essentially from scratch. So he kind of is one of those rags to riches stories in that sense. Someone who began their career kind of penniless and became a billionaire. He was also a person interested in meditation and nature, and even in his years of success as a corporate executive, he's continued to live in a small cabin in the mountains in Colorado, kind of an off-grid type of living experience there. So that's one side of him, this person who's been very interested in all of these New Age topics, who's lived as an off-the-grid environmentalist and a vegetarian. The other side, of course, is the corporate side. And in the corporate world, people often do things that are kind of self-interested or self-absorbed, things which may seem hurtful to others, that are designed to promote the success of the businesses that are involved. And in the process of bringing those two worlds together, the New Age interests and the corporate business interests, he had helped finance or sponsor the careers of some well-known New Age spiritual teachers or esoteric scholars. And all of that led, of course, to the developments with Gaia TV. Gaia TV has gained a lot of prominence by featuring shows that present information from people that are those types of esoteric scholars, especially ones who discuss extraterrestrial phenomenon, who speak about disclosure of all these secrets related to ETs and the secret government factions on our planet. So that's been a main draw for Gaia TV, and perhaps the most well-known personality, we could say, on Gaia has been David Wilcock. Wilcock is host of the show Cosmic Disclosure, and also a show called Wisdom Teachings. Wilcock is a person who has been active in researching these topics throughout most of his life. I first encountered his materials myself around 20 years ago as I was researching these subjects online. At that time, Wilcock had a website which was called Ascension 2000, and subsequent to the year 2000, he changed it to Divine Cosmos. So you'll currently find his website online as divinecosmos.com. But going back to that era prior to 2000, he was presenting some of the more interesting and advanced metaphysical information that was available online at that time. And he also had a very unique, interesting personal story of how he became aware that he had a connection to Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce being one of the most well-known and well-regarded figures in the early part of the 20th century in terms of spirituality and holistic health. Edgar Cayce was known as the sleeping prophet, as he would go into a trance and he would channel some very fascinating advanced information, both specific information for individuals about their health, their astrology, things of that nature, as well as things about the planet, about past civilizations, especially things related to Atlantis. And he was someone who was sought out by important public figures due to the accuracy of his readings, due to that fame that Cayce acquired in his lifetime. So it's not surprising now that David Wilcock, who has this connection, we could say he's part of the same soul or oversoul as Edgar Cayce. He's also gained a lot of public notoriety, in this case through his books, which have become bestsellers, and through his appearances on the Ancient Aliens show on History Channel, and his own shows that have been appearing on Gaia TV. Wilcock is someone who I've respected a lot in terms of his sincerity, his dedication and devotion to sharing valuable spiritual information, as well as exposing a lot of the suppressed knowledge, things that are coming to light more and more now. That doesn't mean I've always agreed with his conclusions about everything, but I do see him as a sincere researcher who has a very positive intention. Now, the latest development or drama that's erupted is reports coming out online from contacts of David and of people at Gaia TV that David Wilcock has submitted a resignation letter which outlines some various concerning, some unethical types of behaviors by the management at Gaia, as well as allegations that they may be involved in some somewhat dark types of spiritual practices. For those that appreciate all the great content that's on Gaia, that may seem surprising or disconcerting, but I don't think it's shocking. I think if we look at any big business enterprise, we'll likely find something that's a concern or some type of shadowy or unethical activity that's occurring, even though there may be some very positive things that are coming out of what that particular organization is offering. So I'm going to share some testimonies, some reports that people who have interacted with these key figures in the Gaia TV drama have shared on the internet. And some of this actually goes back many years into the past, in particular into the dealings of Yurka and a man who goes by the name of Drunvalo Melchizedek. Drunvalo is the teacher, the workshop presenter, known for his work with sacred geometry and with the books called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. The Flower of Life being a geometric pattern that's seen in ancient sites around the world, and which actually is in a way related to the logo that had been used for Gaia, for the company that Yurka has been the head of for so long. They use a portion of the Flower of Life pattern in their products, in their company's logo. So I'm going to go into a few different reports about Drunvalo and his connection to Yurka and the history of their activities or dealings. And this is not in any particular order, but we're going to see that there are some things that most people would be concerned about. So first, I'm going to start with the most kind of esoteric commentary about this. This is from a woman named Barbara Brown, who was very active on the internet a decade or so ago and who has since not been active online, so it's really unknown what's happened with her in recent years. She used a Native American name online, which is Wiolawa, W-I-O-L-A-W-A, or Wio, W-I-O for short. And for her, that was a reference to the owl. She considered herself connected to the bird tribes in Native American lore. And the owl is the bird that has the most resemblance in a certain sense to human beings. Owls have their eyes in the front rather than on the sides like most other birds. Wio, or Barbara, was very much involved in a mindset of kind of a battle between human and reptilian extraterrestrials. So you'll see in her commentary there are references coming from that bias or perspective that she had there. So this is something she posted. R.E. Drunvalo Melchizedek, who is financially backing him. In 98, referring to the year 1998 or so, Drunvalo attempted to infiltrate my house with his assistant, Ron Holt, via Dan Winter, and have me killed. Parentheses, long story. They have a bankroller from, I think it is Czechoslovakia, who is a big drug dealer who came here with Zip, named Yurka, and she doesn't know the spelling, so she writes Y-E-R-K-A, who also financed first Hoagland. She's referring to Richard Hoagland. He bought the, quote, snake Matzdok Drew, and that's her name for Drunvalo, a home in Prescott, Arizona for $1 million. Dan Winter also tried to get this drug lord's money. His name sounds like Gurka or Urka, but is spelled differently. I have forgotten. So she admits she forgot his name spelling. The police also wanted Drunvalo and were after him for running drugs, but he lives in one of the wealthiest communities in Phoenix, Carefree, a gated community, or did. I don't currently follow this snake. So these are Barbara Brown's claims about Drunvalo. Then she says, Ron Holt, I did his photo and his wife's, who's Lissa Royal, who channels the Greys, were full of parasites galore. They're all, quote, evil as they come. His original facilitator, who left him, name redacted, was devastated when she found out how ruthless and fraudulent he was, and became my good friend, which really irked Drunvalo. Braden, which refers to Greg Braden, was made a Melchizedek snake at his home in Prescott in about 1998, after he went to Jekyll Island with Drew being Drunvalo. Two of my close friends were Braden's once. Braden will no longer talk with them. Aho, Leah. So that's part of what she wrote. Then she goes on to say, briefly, let's see where we were. My screen jumped down here for some reason. Briefly, this is it. I had a meeting about the alien issues. Some dragon slayers, so those are people who share in her view about reptilians, came, and Dan Winter asked me if Ron Holt could come. I said no, and then he kept asking and said Ron wouldn't cause trouble. Well, I said finally, okay, my fault there. And I had some Indian friends there too. Ron went straight for Sweet Medicine, that's the name of one of her Indian friends, and tried to recruit him. Drew, that's Drunvalo, and Ron offered Sweet Medicine money, women, and drugs, and went over to Drunvalo's and Ron's house, where Lissa Royal tried to have sex with Sweet Medicine. They knew his allegiances to AIM, which stands for the American Indian Movement, a well-known Indian activist organization from that era, and his run-in with the system. Anyway, Drew showed him his bedroom with lots of weapons, rocket launchers, etc., and asked him to kill me with a silencer. Sweet Medicine said no, he still liked me, etc., and came back to tell me what happened. He was very scared for me and my family, and called Dennis Banks AIM. That's a person who was an influential leader in the American Indian Movement. My husband called the police and a friend of his in SWAT. They knew about Drunvalo, but said they probably couldn't help. So Dennis called Drew and said, if you harm Barbara or Sweet Medicine or her family, we will kill you. He meant it, and of course after that all was quiet. That's basically it. I have had no more contact with Drunvalo. So since that time, she had no more contact directly, personally, with Drunvalo Melchizedek. As far as I know, he moved from Texas to Sedona to Phoenix, and I was horrified. He followed me everywhere, because she herself was in Phoenix around this time. He has been married several times and says his son by a previous wife will lead the world of the so-called indigo children. By the way, if I remember, AIM, the American Indian Movement, was already at that time infiltrating that snake's lair because they already knew. Now here's some information related to Edgar Cayce. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, which relates back to the individuals associated with Drunvalo. From 1997 to February 2013, the Soli founders, that's S-O-L-I, Ronald Holt and Lisa Royal Holt, were contracted to run an organization called Flower of Life Research, based on the works of teacher Drunvalo Melchizedek. During this contracted period, we were responsible for training Flower of Life facilitators, certifying them and assisting them with the educational and organizational support necessary for their work around the world. This contract ended in February 2013. Seed of Life Institute and the Soli School no longer represent the Flower of Life teachings or endorse, promote, or present the work of Drunvalo Melchizedek in any form. All the teachings through our school are our original teachings based on more than 45 years of combined experience by the founders. The term Flower of Life refers to a geometric pattern found all around the world on temples, burial sites, and other sacred locations. Leonardo da Vinci's works are filled with this sacred pattern, among other sacred geometric forms. This Flower of Life pattern is called a creation pattern because within it can be found all the building blocks of creation in a geometric sense. Studying this sacred knowledge leads us to the awesome and humbling conclusion that all life is connected to the same one source. So Holt and his wife, Lisa Royal, who's been a well-known channeler of extraterrestrials, separated themselves from Drunvalo and pioneered or developed their own organization for spreading spiritual teachings. Now here's a little historical background on Drunvalo. Bernard Donald Perona is the actual birth name of Drunvalo. He petitioned in 1991 in Taos, New Mexico, to change his name to Drunvalo Melchizedek. He was born in 1941 in Alameda, California. In New Mexico, as Bernard Perona, he had a company named Knuckle Mystery School, which existed from about 1989 to 2002. Since 2007, as Drunvalo, he has One Lotus LLC in Sedona, Arizona. Claudette Melchizedek is also a manager of the company. Her prior surname was Coletta, and they married in 1994 in Texas. Drunvalo Melchizedek has been married at least once before with that name, and at least once as Bernard Perona. Stan Tenen of the Meru Foundation has revealed in this excerpt below that Drunvalo, Dan Winter, and their benefactor Edgar Cayce were at one point at least all channeling Lucifer. And this is where some of these claims that David Wilcock has alluded to perhaps originate from. The idea that the management at Gaia may be involved somehow in Luciferianism. So let's look at where these particular claims originate from and the story of Dan Winter, Drunvalo, and Stan Tenen. Here's a quote from Stan Tenen, which relates to his legal case, which was in a sense resolved, where he sued Dan Winter. quote, "I was not at all prepared when Mr. Melchizedek told me that he would not rein in Mr. Winter unless I joined with him and his multimillionaire benefactor, Yerka Risavi, in quote, channeling Lucifer. I had previously heard that Mr. Winter, that's Dan Winter, was involved in Satanism, but I had not taken it seriously or tried to confirm this. Mr. Risavi was then CEO of Corporate Express and Translocon in Broomfield, Colorado, and he is now CEO of Gaia, the health food and exercise equipment megacorporation that is currently taking over numerous independent businesses. As we know from the transcript of Mr. Winter's first confession, posted at Mr. Winter's website, danwinter.com, Winter later worked for Translocon under a front company set up by Mr. Risavi until Mr. Risavi fired him for refusing to end his plagiarism of my work. What followed was like a grade B horror or gangster movie. Mr. Melchizedek not only told me that he and Mr. Risavi were channeling Lucifer, but that now that he had told me this, if I did not go along with him and if I did not turn my work over to Mr. Winter, they, and I assume he and or his Lucifer channeling friends, or what he meant, would get me. I was taken completely by surprise. I expected Mr. Melchizedek to be reasonable and caring and to help me to rein in Mr. Winter. Instead, I was told about something really sick and dangerous, and I was told if I did not acquiesce, he and or the others involved with him in channeling Lucifer would actively try to destroy my work and my credibility and see to it that Mr. Winter got the credit, and that they would support Mr. Winter's wildly untrue version of events. You could read about this in the Project Avalon forum. That's projectavalon.net. Project Avalon was started by Bill Ryan, who had originally been the online partner of Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot. And interestingly, Kerry Cassidy has shared about her interactions with Yerka, how he attempted to recruit her to host a show on the Gaia TV network, but because of the circumstances surrounding that and what she felt his intentions were and his desire to not allow her editorial control, that led her to decline that offer. So next we're going to look at a particular letter that was sent to the Flower of Life office at a time when Drunvalo and Bob Dratch, who was working with Drunvalo at that time, were having conflicts with each other. This individual wrote in and was stating how deceived we all were by Drew being Drunvalo, and how if we knew his history, we'd be shocked. I cannot vouch for the actual incidents in here because I was not there. However, Drunvalo's character and repeating patterns and habits are so similar to what is happening today in and around our court events. So Stan Tenen learned about this history of Drunvalo that fit in with the way Drunvalo was acting in regards to Tenen's suit, where Drunvalo and Dan Winter were in a sense trying to gang up on him. Eventually the court did side with Stan Tenen, and Dan Winter was forced to publicly admit that he had plagiarized the work that Tenen had done regarding the Hebrew letters and how that related to sacred geometry. So we're going to go into this statement from an eyewitness to the beginning of Drunvalo Melchizedek's career. They have asked that they remain anonymous. This is a professional person, an author, that the person who's reporting this has known for many years. The original email was received on November 6, 2002. And the email begins, "Hi, here's a rendering of my years with Drunvalo. As you can see, it is of two levels. The first is a surface story. The latter part is analysis and background. I am quite able to stand on the factual nature of every statement. However, I am not desirous of having my name attached to this as of yet, as I am seeking to build credibility by my own work, not as someone who let Drunvalo's cat out of the bag. If this can be shared in a discreet fashion with people who need to know, I am okay with that. I am not sure how you can reassure me that this will not be made public, as we all know how email can propagate even innocently." Like Winter, Bernard Perono's Drunvalo Melchizedek's tale is long and weird. I believe these guys are ill and unlikely to be motivated by much other than their own greed and insecurity, their twisted pasts and tortured dreams. Unfortunately, they have found willing audiences in the New Age among people who want to find something wrong with everything they have been taught before. The audiences are willing dupes taken in by these reptilian-minded men. They are sad cases, really, very lost and insightless. I hope this can be of some help. If it is too much, let me know what you need and I will see how to shorten it. It needs context to make it believable, which is why I have written this as I have. Yikes, what a long, strange tale it is, and it ain't over yet. Hope you are doing very well. And with that introduction the person gives, I would like to point out from my point of view that it's helpful to look at everyone involved in these dramas with compassion, even if people are acting in a dishonest or shadowy manner. There's some deep psychological reason that drove them in that direction, and we're not here to condemn them, to judge them in that sense. We can acknowledge both their shadow side and the positive contributions that they've made. It's all an exercise for our own discernment. So now back to this narrative. Here is a bit of the tale. The person says, "I have had the odd distinction of having been present when a number of unusual events happened in the last 30+ years and have played some small roles in them. Here I relate some details relating to one such era. I am very familiar with the time in the lives of Drunvalo Melchizedek, Bob Dratch, and others. I worked closely with them for about 5 years. Through this association, I was introduced to many folks whose names you may recognize: Dan Winter, Stan Tenen, Slim Sperling, Mary Carolyn Meadows, Greg Braden, Glenn Rhine, the Heart Math Mob, parentheses Lou Childress, Adam Trombley, Doug Gunton, and a host of others. Some still have my admiration. Most do not. Spin doctors, except for Tenen, Trombley, and Braden. Each is responsible for many years of confusion in many people's lives. And of them all, only Tenen has remained above suspicion entirely, in my opinion. We begin. I met Akbar, as he was known then, when a third party I will call B introduced us. B had shown me a strange wire sculpture a folding star that spun and wove a weird energy in the air. I asked where it came from, and B offered to introduce me to the man who had given it to him. We met in a school bus outside of Taos, where Akbar lived. He had a small sewing machine repair business in the outskirts of Taos, where he had moved after living some years at the Lama Foundation. He showed us some drawings, talked about the wire sculpture thing, and offered to teach me a meditation about it, if I would promise to bring another person to learn it with me. B and I encouraged Akbar to gather his work into a curriculum. We helped him hone it and helped him when he chose to move farther out of town to set up a school. We helped with the bills and visited often, setting things in motion. B moved all of his belongings to the school and took up residence, and I kept working through a divorce and the sale of my home in Colorado, planning to move to the new school. We convened a group of friends, kindred spirits, to focus energy into the founding of our new school and to work out a name for it. About 40 showed up as we went around the circle, each describing our dreams for the school. Some common themes came out. I still have my notes from that meeting. When it got to Akbar, he said he had something important to tell us. He announced then that he was no longer Akbar, but Drunvalo Melchizedek, and that he was a walk-in who had stepped into the body of a man who had been killed in an alchemical experiment in Canada. He was taking over the life of Akbar, and would appreciate it if we would refer to him from then on as Drunvalo. He then told us the school was to be called the Knuckle Mystery School. He said the Knuckles were the warrior scholar priests of Atlantis, who spread the teachings of Atlantis around the world as it was disappearing under the waves. We were all a bit taken aback by this peremptory style and the seeming overtaking of our democratic process, but the name for the school seemed like a good one, and we all agreed to proceed. Drunvalo was in his element. He was high on making new plans and decided to buy the property next door, divide it up, and sell lots to friends, thus affording a lot for himself. He said he was under orders from his Egyptian guide to build an underground house to withstand the coming planetary destruction, and he wanted to live with his friends there. He offered to hire me to build his house for him. I had been a commercial woodworker, furniture designer, craftsman, and all-around wood wizard for many years, and this was a tantalizing offer. I finally sold the house in Colorado and moved to New Mexico to build his underground house for him. I moved to Garcia, a small town nearby, and began working on Drunvalo's house site. Several weeks into the project, I was walking between the site and the school offices, about 300 yards, and I came upon a large rattlesnake. The rattlesnake was lying across the path. We had dealt with an abundance of snakes that summer, disposing of them by picking them up on a shovel, dropping them in a 5-gallon bucket, and quickly closing the lid on them. We would then drive them to a location far from houses and release them. I was not scared, as I had had many encounters with them in the days of my desert wanderings. So I stopped, watched, and eventually sat down by the snake. He curled up under a sagebrush, very tense, watching and flicking his tongue to taste the volatile oils of my body that were in the air. Rattlesnakes can't hear you, but can feel you and see your scent, and they can see your heat. This one could tell I wasn't dangerous, so he gradually relaxed. I sat quietly watching, observing his breathing and trying to match it. His head swung slowly back and forth, tongue flickering and waving, but finally became still. He lowered his head and lay still. At that moment, Drunvalo came upon me, sitting. He asked what I was doing, and I pointed to the snake. He exclaimed and grabbed a steel post. He said, "We have to start killing them all. We can't let these snakes hurt anyone." With that, he smashed the post down, stabbing the snake behind its head. He stomped and stabbed until the head came off, the body torn and bleeding, writhing in the dust. The body continued to writhe, squirming mindlessly. It twisted over and over. I was stunned, shocked. I could say nothing. Drunvalo told me to come in the house for lunch. After lunch, I went home, very disturbed by what I had seen. I stopped off at the house that Drunvalo was living in, up the road, to see his girlfriend. She had asked me to stop by to discuss something important, but hadn't told me what it was about. When she saw me, she knew something was bothering me and asked what it was. I told her about the snake incident, and she gasped. She was horrified, angry. She had told Drunvalo that the snake situation was important, that we must treat all the snakes with reverence, and that she took a personal interest in protecting the snakes. She was furious. She told me she had asked me to stop by to propose that I be nominated by her to be the supervisor of the Knuckle Mystery School. She said she felt there were too many problems between Drunvalo and B, who by this time was living at the school in the bus that Drunvalo had been living in when I met him, and that someone needed to be an intermediary. She felt that I was the most likely person for the job, since both respected me, I was living nearby, and had played an important role so far. I was a bit taken aback and also very proud of this sudden turn of events. Perhaps the snake represented a past that was being shed, and a passage from fear to freedom, a release of a primal energy into a new higher form. As I drove home to Garcia, I was filled with a powerful mixture of feelings. I had started off befriending the snake, overcoming all natural fears, moving with a sort of pure grace into relationship with a deadly adversary. Then a cherished friend betrayed me, my new symbolic relationship and a whole set of dreams, by the senseless mutilation and killing of an innocent. From that I was offered a position that was like the culmination of all my dreams. One day, up, down, up again. Could I let the lesson of the snake be lost? Could I allow the plainly unaware, stupid actions of Drunvalo go unnoticed? The life of the snake was merged into my own. I was the reason it stopped. I was the one who pointed him out. I had been entranced by his beauty, his pure snake self. I could not let his death go for naught. On reflection and then discussing things with B, I came to see the situation in a clear but distressing light. B, whom I trust implicitly, lives by the golden rule. He gives where is need. He trusts completely in the cycle of life, that whatever he gives will eventually be returned. He trusts the flow, and he begins each relationship with trust. If he has come to distrust you, it's because the trust he originally gave you has been destroyed. Drunvalo, on the other hand, was convinced that by serving his needs well, creatively and completely, he would have such a surplus he could afford to give much away. He was capable of living simply so he could give much to others once there was enough. He was not forthcoming with trust, with intimacy, or the personal parts of the human life. He was impersonal, distant. One had to earn his trust, if at all. His claim to being a walk-in was put in a new light. He was different than we were. His values seemed strange. He was walking his talk all right. There are two antithetical lifestyles, yet the two of them were trying to work and live side by side. B was committed to the idea that the school itself was the teaching, and that it should demonstrate all the points we were teaching about a new relationship to the earth. We should have gardens, beauty, grace, sustainability, economic communalism. Much of B's time was spent on working on gardens, recycling systems, kitchen management, maintenance tasks, and general improvements to everything. He was contributing to the growth of the school by his endless lists of contacts, bringing them to the school for 3-day seminars. He was the one who lined up the food for the classes, made sure the firewood was cut, fixed the tankless hot water heater, got flat tires fixed in town, and all the endless chores of living remote. He also arranged for the building of a kiva sweat lodge, a magical half-underground round room with a fire pit in the middle and wide adobe benches in a circle around the walls. A wonderful space for us to dream, meditate, and teach. Drunvalo spent his days on the phone, writing, meditating, or entertaining the many visitors, especially the female visitors. There are many women who are taken to his bed, whose lives were made turbulent by his cold and impersonal search for a female companion. It was a sad scene to those of us who watched. Drunvalo was, according to himself, a master of, quote, Egyptian Tantra, a secret system of sexual energy control that was part of the Atlantean legacy. He taught vague ideas around the subject and a few clear meditation images, and was thinking of offering special classes in this. Many of the women who came were invited to his bed. He was searching and finally had invited one to live with him several months earlier. She had invited me to consider being the supervisor of the school. I was nominated, accepted, and installed as supervisor. Drunvalo and I had been working for some time on a system for him to have slides of his images and basic teachings about the geometric forms that he could project onto the rear of a screen that would show through, so he could be in front of it to talk. I had loaned him a camera, helped him locate the sources for the rear projection system, and helped photograph the images one of my close friends had drawn for him. B had done his usual magic, contacting people in California, setting up a series of workshops for Drunvalo. He set off, that's Drunvalo, set off in his trusty Volkswagen camper to do several weeks of engagements, as fully prepared as we could help him to be. I settled into the quagmire of taxes, the situation of the school and its sales tax reporting, and the income taxes for the school, which had never been filed in 2 years of its existence. It was a mess, and a lot of tiny scraps of receipts and check stubs had to be sorted out and made into a report. It was the least favorite of all occupations for my time that I could think of, but the house building was on hold until Drunvalo could return with money to continue. Upon Drunvalo's return, we had a meeting. We congratulated him on his successful trip. The reports of his classes were glowing, the people very excited by what they had heard from him. When we asked him how much money had been earned, he told us he had $15,000 in cash from the trip. We were excited. We could pay some outstanding bills, make some improvements to some necessary things, and do more classes. I gave them my report on the taxes, telling them I was only the preparer and was not going to sign the documents since I was not involved in the management of the corporation during the time covered by the report. The name on the corporation papers was Drunvalo's (Bernard Corona). B told of his work on various projects and prospects for the next series of classes. At that point, Drunvalo quietly told us that we were mistaken in thinking that we were going to spend any of the money on Nicole, that he had earned the money and it was his. He was planning on hiring a professional builder to finish his house, and he had no intention of signing the tax report. With that, it all dissolved. We could hardly believe our ears. We had been betrayed. There was nothing to be done at that point but find a way out. In the end, he signed the tax papers. B packed his things into a truck and moved to land his family owned about 100 miles away. He had moved his entire lifetime of collections to Knuckle to be part of the school. He had committed himself and his assets and was now out of the picture. Drunvalo went on to make entirely unfounded public accusations against me and B. He told public gatherings that we were agents of the government, drug dealers, and he had had to banish us from his list of friends. We were both damaged by these lies, but did not want to contend with his madness anymore. I reeled about for a while, dizzy from the turn of events. I had been on a high since the day of the snake, walking with purpose in every step, powerfully aware of the life that had been given on the day of my stepping into my role, my supervisory role of the School of Ancient Mysteries. Eventually, Drunvalo sold the property to Greg Braden, who had been a student. When it was sold, Drunvalo made off with the $35,000 down payment funds that had been supplied by friends of B's and mine. When the property was originally purchased, he never would pay it back, refusing when confronted, making up a story that he had been relieved of the debt verbally in a conversation that had never happened. Now, some background details that have come to light since those days. Drunvalo Melchizedek is mentally ill, in my opinion, the opinion of this writer. He suffers from a New Age disease, perhaps identifiable in traditional psychology, parentheses, split personality disorder, multiple personality disorder. He claims to be a walk-in. He sees himself as not responsible for anything he does as Drunvalo, since that is a 13th dimensional being of the order of Alpha and Omega of the Melchizedek lineage, who has overshadowed his personality. He claims to have died in a failed alchemical accident in 1972 and was entered into by Drunvalo Melchizedek. He has told me face to face many times over that he cannot be held responsible for what Drunvalo Melchizedek does. He told me in September 1997 that he could not recall actions of his own, often only 20 minutes later. He then demonstrated this by trying to steal a portion of my life's work while standing right behind my chair less than 20 minutes later. This happened after apologizing profusely and apparently sincerely to me while on his knees next to my chair in a public dining room. I recall his pride in being so powerful that he could have conversations with Lucifer and all of the dark hordes. On several occasions, he led us as a group into dark realms, causing on one memorable occasion a near catastrophic whirlwind on a calm day. When windows were blown open, animals outside ran around screeching and neighing, and terror and chaos was set loose. After about 5 minutes of this, Drunvalo calmly led us into a new part of his experimental group Merkaba, and everything returned immediately to calm. The wind stopped, the animals returned to their normal activities. He claimed to have helped to restore the angel of light, Lucifer, to his former status as the first son of God by special ceremonies he had conducted in Egypt and the South Pacific, where he claimed to have done rituals that rebalanced the planet, making it once more a sacred world now that Lucifer was redeemed. Let's put his story in perspective. He was a live-in student of the Lama Foundation for years, where the ISC was, Intensive Study Center. This was a Sufi repository of texts and manuscripts built around an amazing library that has since been destroyed by fire. He was among some heavies there. It is likely that he gained access to some ancient texts while there, and began assembling his story of divine revelation. What he was working with is described as dangerous in the original literature for good reason. The Catholic Inquisition was set in motion centuries ago to root out this very set of teachings, as it was making people go mad, setting Satan loose. He left there in some kind of upset that I never got to the bottom of. He took up residence in a school bus where he was discovered by B. He claimed to be in direct contact with a 35,000-year-old still living being named Chikutet or Thoth, who was transmitting to him a series of lessons he was to give to the world. He also claimed to have been given the Masonic keys by a mysterious visitor and the Metatron's cube wire model by a stranded ET whom he helped return home. All this was compounded into his flower of life teachings, which we now know are nothing but a hodgepodge of stolen, irresponsible, and incomplete meditation techniques that he cobbled together with amateur geometry and claimed to be an inspired revelation from an unquestionable source. He always maintained that he had no problem with sharing his work with all sides, all agencies, all types of people, that the work was so powerful in itself it would not be possible for it to be abused. He taught that Lucifer had been healed in part due to his, Drunvalo's, intervention and mediation, had been forgiven, and was now on the side of good, working to restore what he had damaged, and that all aliens are good and not to be feared. And he is a pathological liar, incessantly remaking his stories, embroidering more fantasies onto the robe with which he surrounds truth. There are two tectonic plates in his being, and they don't meet well. He is a sick man, also charming and polite, who is dangerous on many levels. Having used the resources of many to aid his own personal agendas, he is supremely selfish. His many abandoned children could tell the story. If we look at the activities of the last 5 years, only a few of them, all public, will reveal something of the man. He was involved with a man named Slim Sperling and another named Bob Dratch for a while. Drunvalo claimed that they had created a set of devices that cleared the atmosphere of all pollution and attested in public that this had been done under government auspices, and a test had been done in Mexico City where a wall of pollution could be seen as it boiled against the force field of their instruments. Many other claims were made, such as a reduction in crime in Denver as a result of their experiments, and many people were induced to buy those devices. Then it all began to fall apart as people discovered they had been duped. Drunvalo retracted it all, ended his relationship with Sperling and Dratch, and they now refuse to answer any questions about the episode. Another story. In the last few years, Drunvalo took the story of the Kogi Indians of South America and tried to make advantage for himself out of them. They are a weird tribe who practice a fascist-type feudalism with slaves and cocaine-eating priests who were made famous by a pseudo-documentary. And that is an actual tribe there in the mountains in Colombia. Of course, different people have different beliefs or perspectives about that tribe and their practices. But let's get to what this person describes about Drunvalo's use of their story. Drunvalo began claiming he was being taught by them to communicate without words across any distance. Drunvalo asked for financial support for his work, which he assured his followers was going to be made available to them all and would save the world. Eventually, as you will see if you visit his websites, Drunvalo claimed that he was not going to talk about any of this anymore, quote, to protect the Kogi, and asked that no one visit them in any attempt to verify anything he had said, as this would make things difficult for the Kogi. Or in other words, Drunvalo had been caught out in another lie. And one final bit. I am a close friend of his personal assistant for many years. She was fired by Drunvalo when she confronted him for misusing nonprofit funds. A few weeks after her removal, Drunvalo forged her signature on a check and put more nonprofit money into his own accounts. This came under FBI investigation and may still be under investigation. And in where this was reported, Stan Tenen adds his own comment. I can verify this. I spoke with Melchizedek's wife of the time this incident occurred, and she confirmed this information independently. Also, because of our ongoing lawsuit against Mr. Daniel Winter, Cynthia and I were in communication with this personal assistant of Melchizedek's both just before and just after she left or was fired. Until I read this email, I did not know that the author of this personal statement knew these facts. So back to that testimonial, Drunvalo, according to that writer, is the type of man who claims that any legal action against him are inspired by dark forces trying to keep the truth from being told. He is a dyed-in-the-wool conspiracist, believing that anyone who opposes him is an agent of dark forces. It is odd that the man who says that there are no dark forces anymore, that Lucifer is abroad and is a good guy now, and that invites anyone of any type or motivation to delve deeply into his stolen teachings without concern for how they might use it, to claim that he is under suspicion not for illegal acts, but for trying to tell the truth. His association with Dan Winter is long and close. Both are delusional and dangerous, in my opinion. End of statement. So we have this person who was very intimately involved with Drunvalo in his school, who exposes a lot about what went on there and about the split personality of Drunvalo Melchizedek. If we think about the channeling phenomenon, when a person goes into a deep trance and channels, their ordinary personality is stepping aside and allowing another consciousness to step in and use that person to communicate. When you do that, it's hard to know or control what type of being or entity is actually stepping in. Drunvalo may be a very sincere channel in that sense, where he is allowing various entities to come through him and deliver various esoteric information, and he himself may believe much or all of that information. It's hard for me or anyone else to say, but that doesn't mean that just because it is a genuine channeling phenomenon that the information itself is all accurate or trustworthy. Next, I'm going to share some information that Stan Tenen reported, and this is something that you can find also on the Project Avalon website in a series that's been compiled from a man named Daniel List, the dark journalist. List has gone into some depth about the founder of Gaia and concerns about what Gaia TV may be up to. So it says here in an email from Stan Tenen to Jack Sarfati of 2001, this is what Stan wrote. Quote, I have noticed that a good deal of the slander and disinformation seems to be coming toward me from the same source. People living in the former communist Czechoslovakia and or Poland. The Melchizedek Flower of Life cult, Mr. Winter, whom I sued, and several other New Age lunatics have all been funded to the tune of several $1 million by Mr. Jirka Rysavy, the former CEO of Corporate Express, a Fortune 500 monolith. Rysavy was trained by the Czech Communist government for Olympic competition, and as I recall, part of his training was in Poland. There is an old Business Week article that I'm sure is available. Rysavy threatened me and attempted to extort me into turning my work over to Mr. Winter, even though he knew Mr. Winter was involved in Satanism, and even though he knew Mr. Winter was fascinated with Nazism and was willing to use its anti-Semitic methods. Rysavy is now running a company called Gaia, which is buying up health food and New Age independence. Gaia bought Real Goods in Ukiah, California, for example. I hear from people who are business acquaintances of Mr. Rysavy that he's planning an international cable TV and or internet network that he intends to use to corner the market for public communication on New Age lunacy. He plans to salt his program schedule with innocent, serious people for credibility, but to load it up with his Looney Tune friends. I've personally met Mr. Rysavy. He was in my house. This is a very dangerous person. It's my suspicion that Mr. Rysavy is fronting for something else. Internet speculation includes claims of KGB, Nazi gold, and just about every other source you can imagine. I haven't a clue. All I know is that these guys are all bad news. So that's from Stan Tenen, who was involved in that legal dispute where Dan Winter and Drunvalo were using his work without his permission and distorting it to fit their claims. If we look at what's been shared, it's kind of unfortunate that you have this enterprise which is seeking to be the one that people go to get this type of information. In other words, spiritual information, health and wellness information, information on disclosure, on all the things that have been kept from humanity that we could actually use to better our lives, to improve our planet and our society. That people who are the ones who in a sense have control over this type of information have these shady traits, these kind of narcissistic aspects to their personalities. Personally, having studied many of those types of materials, I recognize that this phenomenon is nothing new. Throughout history, you've had honest teachings and information become in some way adulterated by people with ulterior motives. In the present situation, I think we all need to use our discernment to realize that truth is always something that doesn't come easily. There's always going to be some disinformation out there, some of it intentional, some of it unintentional. We often have people who are kind of drawn into the orbit of these charismatic personas, people who are being conned in some way, who don't realize that they're being used or manipulated in order to further someone else's agenda. The example of people like David Wilcock or Corey Goode, who present information on Gaia TV, is kind of a sampling of that phenomenon, where they may be genuinely sharing what they believe to be true from their research and experience, and in some way the management of this corporation is trying to use them for some other purpose, whether it's just to monitor them, to own and make money off of what they're teaching, to in a way surveil them so that by having them under their wing at that network they can be monitored. We really don't know what possibilities might be there, what agendas might be carried out. What we do know is that David Wilcock and Corey Goode are not happy with the way they were treated there, and that Corey has taken some legal action against Gaia, and David Wilcock has written a letter of resignation, which hasn't formally become public, but which has been leaked through other significant personalities. For those that are fans of that network, it's your choice if you want to remain a member and continue to access their media. The internet is something that has a vast amount of content on it now, so we can learn things from many different sources. There are multiple places where we can watch videos. There are thousands of websites that have this type of information on it, so we're not really confined to Gaia, to YouTube, to any one particular site. However, if a company such as Gaia were to buy out many of the most prominent researchers and have control over their content, then that could be an unsettling phenomenon, because they would have the power, the legal ability to control that content and to either block it from public access or to charge ridiculously high fees for it, if that was something that they wanted to do. Therefore, anytime there's some effort to corner a market, to get a monopoly on something, there is the potential for that to be abused. Those who are watching my commentary here, I appreciate you taking your time to consider this subject, and also to consider the way that you process and digest the information that you're exposed to, whether it's my videos, things you're watching on YouTube or Gaia, or viewing on any particular website, things you're reading in books. We're all human beings here. We all have blind spots. We all have shadows. We all make errors in judgment at different times. So no one's perfect. And even those that we may see in a very negative light, it's helpful to have some form of compassion for them, to not hold any ill will toward those individuals, to see that they are there for us to each learn something from, If they're present in our reality, they may be there to teach or reflect something to us. So rather than being upset about these things, it's helpful to pause and consider what lessons are present, what things we can learn or gain from what we're becoming conscious of. For those that are interested in these subjects, in spirituality, in holistic health and wellness, in metaphysics, I encourage you to watch more of my YouTube videos. You're also welcome to visit my website, which is www.phinsights.com. For now, I want to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.